All right. And we are live just a couple minutes late. And I'm excited to be back for the 10th Food AI collab. And joining me today is someone I've gotten to know him over the past couple years, Olaf. Olaf, I wanted to do your name with the correct pronunciation, but I'm afraid I'm going to screw it up. The American would say Van der Veen, but how do you pronounce your last name?
Van der Veen, it would be.
All right. Not bad. I'm excited to talk with you because we've been talking, over now and then over the past couple of years about AI, in particular, how it impacts food waste. And that's what today's conversation is about. And I really do think that if we look at all the applications of AI and ones that could really have an impact on our food system, I think the impact of food waste and how AI can reduce food waste is going to be one of the biggest movers of the needle, quite honestly. And so excited to have you participate. But before we get started, I would love for you to talk a little bit so people have the context of what you have been building with Orbisk and what the company's all about.
Yeah, no, I couldn't agree more, but let's get into that later. So what I do now, currently I'm the Chief Impact and Innovation Officer. Until recently, I was the CEO at my company Orbisk. Orbisk is focusing on mitigating food waste levels in the food services space as a whole. So that means we outfit the waste bins of restaurants, or again, restaurants in the widest scope of things, meaning hotels, corporate dining facilitators, cruise ships, and so many more. We outfit them with our technology, being a weighing scale and a camera unit that we put around your existing waste bin where you've always wasted food. But now all of a sudden, everything that enters that waste bin is automatically tracked using our powerful AI technology. Actually, I have one standing right here for those.
Oh, wow. There you go.
There we go. Everything that enters that waste bin is now automatically tracked, quantified, qualified, and also we find out where it came from in your organization, in your process, and by outlining that data and feedbacking it back to you, we will help you to see where your recurring waste is and how to address that accordingly, which leads to significant waste reductions. And waste reductions means less impact on the planet, so more sustainability, but also a pretty significant profitability increase. It could quite literally double your profit margins by just reducing your waste stream.
And I do want to talk a little bit about that later, about how you framed it on waste reduction and how that impacts the bottom line, because I think that's important in today's moment. But let's talk a little bit about how you came up with the concept. I think it's a really great use of computer vision. I think that back of house food service spaces have been notorious for just so much food going into the waste bin. And so what was the original kind of genesis of the idea? How did you come up with this light bulb moment to think of this?
Yeah. So in my previous normal career, let's say, I worked for a retailer and I was a data consultant. As a data consultant, you're the bridge builder between technology and business, right? So basically you are the interpreter between those two worlds that don't speak each other's languages very well. Now, I think that is what my purpose on this planet is. That is what I do particularly well, but I wanted to focus that on a sustainability topic that was sizable enough for me to make a real difference on that scale of the planet. So I started researching what's the biggest sustainability problems in the world. And on many, many lists, food waste was one of the prime, if not the prime reason, or at least solvable problem that we have in this world when it comes to the sustainability topic, greenhouse gases in particular. So diving into this food waste topic, I was working for a retailer, but I found out that the food services industry is actually about two to three times more wasteful than the retail industry, which is notorious for food waste. But the food service industry is actually 2 to 3 times more wasteful than retail is. And I used to work my educational career. I used to work my student jobs in restaurants, and I was thinking back. I like to sleep in, so whenever I stay in a hotel, I'm generally the last person to be in the breakfast buffet, and also therefore the last person to leave. And all of a sudden it clicked, all of these breakfast buffets upon me being the last person leaving them being overstocked, completely full still. And knowing what I know about hygiene code and such, that means that all of that food needs to go to waste, period. You can't use it anymore. That's just the way it is. And that's when it all sort of clicked together. I knew what retail had already solved, and food service was hadn't just yet. But I also realized that there's, this can't inhibit their process. Period. It needs to be seamless. And this is, luckily clicked at the same time as the time when computer vision was really scaling up to be something like actually usable in society. So those two things came together. I figured the only way we can really solve this and seamlessly solve this is when we use camera technology, and that's then it galvanized into what we have today.
And I know that computer vision is probably the most mature in many ways of AI that's in the market today, being used and making a big impact. And so allowing these systems to kind of build the data around and understand what is actually in the back of the house or in the kitchen and actually going in the waste bin. But can you talk about, since you founded the company and what you've learned, the evolution of building your data set? Because as we know, data is so fundamental to kind of building AI models. And so talk a little bit about how you went about building that and how that's really kind of changed over the past, I think you guys were founded in what, 2017, 2018?
2019. Yeah.
2019. Talk about the kind of building your data models and how that's been a big focus and how that's evolved.
Yeah, so it's an interesting question indeed, because looking at the time where we are today, LLMs, modal models, doing various stuff, they can deal with images reasonably well, but they can deal with images upon which they were trained, and they are trained on the internet. But back when we started, that was not as commonplace as it is now. But those those multimodal models, those LLMs, are still trained on the internet. And what's on the internet? The internet is full of food, but it's full of Instagram food. There's sort of everything on the internet, for the most part, looks perfect, and that's the difference between sort of the scenario and the context that we're trying to capture. That is the back of house of kitchens, and you've been there, and I suppose many of the listeners here, in one way or the other, have seen sort of what the back of house looks like. That doesn't look perfect. That looks far from perfect. All of that food is mangled together if it's on a plate, but also it's in big hotel pans, it's in storage containers, it's half sort of already, because we're talking 70% of the food that goes to waste never even touched the plate. So we're talking big produced food. And that there's just no data set on the internet for that kind of food. And therefore, the type of recognition that we were in pursuit of, food just before it gets wasted, that wasn't there. And then indeed, in this niche, it is indeed, in the end, it is niche. But this niche circumstance just didn't have a data set. So the only way to get a data set is to start living in reality. So we started building prototypes, and now we're far from prototypes. We're a very sturdy product, but we started just putting cameras in kitchens and pointing at that waste bin, and started collecting that data set from the ground up, because it was just not there. And then you can still enrich it with Instagram internet food, but that core data set is still our most valuable asset. All of the models that we put on top, we added a lot of intelligence. There's a lot of IP and trade secrets there, but basically without that data set, even that whole infrastructure would be useless. I'm not sure if I'm answering your question. But
No, it is. And I'm curious from a practical implementation standpoint, I see your product going into lots of different types of customers, lots of different venues, and every restaurant, every food service kitchen is different, and the practices are different and the menus are different. So how much is it a kind of just plug and play versus you have to train on specific data for like a cruise ship or like a casino or like a restaurant chain that your new customers? How much is it training on new data versus leveraging existing data you've built for your model in the past?
Yeah, no, that's a super good question. I mean, surprisingly, there's a surprisingly big overlap about what food looks like. Obviously, some people have salad X and other people have salad Y. There's slight differences. So we have customer-specific nuances that we can solve for. But for the most part, actually, and we're not even talking sort of cruise ships versus restaurants. That's all more or less still Western food. We're also in India, and we're in Central Africa, and we're in Kazakhstan, like Central Asia. So that's where food properly looks different. from what a cruise ship or a Dutch restaurant here in my country would look like. So, but still the food looks remarkably the same, because in the end, everyone does still serve bell peppers and onions and potatoes and whatever. And of course, the curries versus the burgers versus the pizzas versus whatever you have on a local level, there's nuances there. But for the most part, the core of that data set, food does look very similar around the globe. And then we add, local knowledge. And that's what LLMs can actually help us with substantially, because an LLM, if you have some sort of exotic Kazakh snack that we've never seen or heard of, you and me, then an LLM will be able to sort of help you out and figure out what this exactly is, such that you can really tailor your data to the local cuisine and further enrich that.
Can you paint a picture for us of how much, kind of where we are today in food service places where they are leveraging this type of technology? Is the penetration of what you're building and maybe others that are similar, is it like at 1%, 5%, 10%? And then how does that compare to just a couple of years ago?
Yeah, I would say, it very much depends on what you define as the industry, which is sort of vague in this context. Yeah. But let's say I've seen figures that there's about 10 million restaurants globally, food services venues. Considering that me and all of the other players in the industry have maybe collectively 15,000 of those. Okay. We're only scratching the surface. And of course, that is a particular subsegment of that, which a lot of us focus on, which is the larger venues that really run an operations that is scalable and repetitive. So, because that's where our insights come most into are put to best use, so to say. But having said that, we're really only scratching the surface, and that has to do with where the technology is today and whatever. So we're hoping to have a solution that one day will be available to 75% of restaurants. But quite honestly, our solution for now is fit for, say, the top 30%, because those are big enough and work in a particular way that we're now used to. But I dream of being able to equip 75% of the industry, or at least 75% of the type of restaurants that we have, because I want everyone to be able to join this play.
So talking about motivating more restaurants to get on board, I think that you mentioned earlier that a good argument for this is you're reducing less waste. And I think that's a message that resonates nowadays. Mm-hmm. I think obviously people who are mission driven and say, hey, we need to put less CO2 in the environment and kind of less food waste is just basically contributing to climate change. We're still going to be passionate about that. But I think businesses really care about the bottom line, especially as food prices are going up. And so can you talk about the impact? First, a two-part question. Let's talk about that, like the messaging change. And then I also want to talk about the impact you make once you go into restaurants. But have you changed your messaging? And are you finding in the past year or two, the focus is increasing on making that bottom line impact message versus, hey, let's just make the world a better place with less CO2?
Yeah. That's an interesting one. I think our messaging has been pretty consistent over the last couple of years, because we do come out with, this is what you can save on a monetary sort of level. Sure. And then whilst increasing your sustainability. Way at the start, being a purpose-driven entrepreneur, I was telling everyone about this sustainability topic, right? Because this is where my heart was. I started the company for a reason. I wanted to make the world a better place. Yeah. And it's not like my clients don't care. Absolutely, they do. But they need to do so in a way that is, in our case, at least it shouldn't hurt their business. And in our case, it also profits them. And they can do a multitude of things to make more profit. But in this case, they can make more profit whilst, increasing their sustainability in an area that goes more or less unseen. So when I started talking to them about sustainability, they started asking me for, okay, but what's the
bottom line impact?
What's the return? And when I start to talk to them about their return, that's when they're starting to ask me for sustainability. So I've been able to flip the coin on that, because I know that once I've answered that question of yes, this will give a return. In fact, it will give you a return that might be up to 10x on our technology, maybe doubling your profit margin. Then all of a sudden we can start talking sustainability, which I'm excited for. Having said that, we do notice this movement in the market that you just alluded to. I mean, food prices everywhere have risen for a multitude of reasons. Climate being one of them, geopolitical conflict being another one of them. So food's become so much more expensive in the last couple of years that this is really on their mind more than ever. And in addition to that, labor has increased as well in terms of the amount of money everything costs. And every single pound on your end of the Atlantic that's being wasted has also been cooked, procured, and all of that has labor ingrained into it. So whilst you're saving those pounds of actual food produced, you're also saving an extra amount of labor that you'll also find in your P&L as a bottom line increase. So it's a double whammy there. And we've really seen that change significantly in the last couple of years.
Can you talk about the ways in which food service companies maybe start changing their behavior once they implement these computer vision systems that are tracking what's going out? Is it like menu changes? Is it like better forecasting of what they need to maybe make each day? Like, what are the ways in which they start to see a return on savings and based on implementing this technology?
Yeah, heavily depending on the context, obviously. But let's as a sort of industry summary, like I mentioned before, 70% of the food that goes to waste has never even been on a plate. So we're generally not talking about portion size changes. It's slightly different where you are. In the US, there is more plate waste than there is in Europe, we see on average, but still. The first thing they can change is the food that never even made it to the plate. So they start altering their production schedules. They start altering their personnel plannings. They start altering their procurement practices. Really, everything that never left the kitchen is just a waste to anyone. So anything, and in fact, by getting a better grip on this, you can actually increase your guests' experiences in your front of house. So to make this tangible, we're really talking about. I've got a lot of exotic stories if you want them later, but fundamentally we talk about you're always wasting a whole bunch of tomatoes every Tuesday morning. So see what your procurement line is and why you repeatedly have too much tomatoes explicitly on the Wednesday mornings, or your desserts on Wednesday nights are not consumed the way they are in other days, or the week on a Friday it's your salad bar, whatever it may be. That's where the real upside is. But and another example is the way we were talking about breakfast buffets earlier. There's so many ways you can present your breakfast buffets or any sort of buffet, also in corporate dining settings, that will still make it look rich and full and tasty, with being like 80% less wasteful by just presenting your food and the way you manage it in a different way than what you're used to in sort of old food service practices. That's where the real savings really come in. And again, in most cases, it actually elevates your guest's experience in its wake, because less food waste doesn't mean we're all on a diet all of a sudden.
I think in our pre-call, you mentioned, and I thought this was a bit surprising, that you felt retailers were much further, or retail as a venue, as a space, is further ahead of food service in terms of being able to really kind of ratchet down the amount of waste. Can you talk about the different spaces, food service and restaurants and retail, where you see technology like AI and where it is today, and what kind of impact it's making? So talk specifically about retail and then maybe food service.
Yeah. So when it comes to the practical nature of their business, retail has a couple of major advantages over food service when it comes to the tracking of their products through their operation. Because you're a retailer looking at your the majority of your assortment, say a pack of cookies. You receive a pack of cookies with a barcode, and you sell a pack of cookies with a barcode. So you're selling the same item as the one that you procured, and it comes in a box of 12. You put it on the shelf. You're selling it, and maybe one gets stolen or broken, but that's about it. Consider the food service space. You're receiving tomatoes. Somewhere in the process, you turn that into tomato soup, and then you serve it as tomato soup. And for one product in your process turns into something else. Tomatoes turn into soup. Goat's cheese and walnuts turn into a salad. And then and that process generally goes digitally untracked. And then that product that you sell at the end of the line also doesn't have a barcode. So it's also like it turned into something else, and that makes it so much harder to track. Plus, third angle here, all of that stuff that you just produced is super fresh. That pack of cookies will be good for months, if not years. All of this stuff that you've just made expires within hours. So that makes it so much harder in the food service space to do this tracking. So it's not sort of an oddity that the food service space is just lacking. They have a significantly more challenging environment when it comes to this food waste space. And that's why it was so important. That's why we need to throw more like computer vision and these live images at it than retail does. Having said all of that, the major unlock to both industries, and also the data quality in retail is not perfect, but significantly better, is forecasting, consumption forecasting. How much will you need tomorrow? Which is again based, which is shit in and shit out. The data quality for those services will mean how successful you can be. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. And I was just at in the middle of America in Illinois at this farm show, and obviously we know farming has been a big user of computer vision, but even there's so much waste that actually happens on the farm, or food basically just never even gets harvested, goes to waste, and there's just not great communication between like the downstream consumption and need for particular types of crops versus what's happening upstream, what the pricing is going to be. There's so increasingly, I think, looking forward, if AI can help us tie together all the different parts of the food value chain for forecasting as a through line and a thread, I think that's going to be hugely valuable, because I think each different venue or theater for food consumption or whatever, whether it's the farm and the retail, in the restaurant, even in the home, these spaces are not kind of communicating. And I think over time, you'll see increasing connection between these different silos.
Yeah, we were all hoping that blockchain would do that, right? This was a big hype back then. Blockchain would connect the whole food chain, and now all of a sudden, and that never materialized, or at least maybe for parts, but hardly. So with AI, we've got a new shot at that. That is for sure. Yeah.
It was interesting. There's a question from the audience from Carlos. Carlos says, "Can we figure out a way?" And this is not necessarily in your space, but you maybe have some thoughts. A way to take the food that will be wasted and not land on the plate that could be sent to people who need it. Can AI actually make a difference, I think, in kind of repositioning and maybe saving food, maybe in food insecure environments? Have you given thought to that? Maybe through kind of two-sided marketplaces or kind of matching? What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I believe that can be done to some extent. At least, again, talking about the food service space, the problem with this fresh food is, again, it expires really, really fast before it even gets to someone that might need it. But, to make it all even sort of harder, it's just illegal. Like anything that was already sort of plated or within the realm where your guests are consuming is for the most part illegal to further distribute due to food security type of stuff. And even though you were just standing there maybe having this croissant, yet when this breakfast buffet is closed, it depends on the type of product, but most products can't be further distributed even to those in need. So that's why I do believe, Carlos, thanks for that question, that there is opportunities there. But I think the biggest opportunity is making sure that by the end of the chain where we operate, we forecast as accurate as possible, just sort of decimating food waste at that place to the lowest, or at least food surplus to the lowest possible point, because from that point on, that food can no longer be used, and all of the surplus food that it creates further up the chain can still be redistributed to those in need. And there, I do believe there's a major role that AI or automation, or sort of at least proper data connection between those parties, can significantly aid to where that food needs to go to actually help those that really need it so direly.
How has the conversation changed with some of the food service companies, the restaurants, whatever you talk to? I know you guys have recently kind of gone into the airplane and air travel space, but has the conversation changed over in the past 6 years as you've been running Orbisk, where people are like more aware of this technology or more receptive to it? Maybe because of things like food waste, food costs going up. How has the conversation changed as you talk to prospective customers?
Yeah. Both those are true. Food cost changes, but also, the other one is
Just
legislation.
awareness.
Yeah. So the SDGs, for instance, it's a major driver for this topic being higher on everyone's agendas. Food costs, just sort of people really eating up their bottom line to their, or at least losing their bottom line to their waste bins, is a big driver. And general sort of awareness, indeed, of your guests also plays a role. That doesn't apply everywhere in the world or in every type of restaurant. There's still a lot of sort of restaurants that serve those who want to have endless piles of food being presented to them. But more and more of the guests, especially in metropolitan areas, do expect a responsible service from their restaurateur, right? From the venue that they're dining in, that they're having their conference in, and whatever. So more and more the expectation of the guests is also for a responsible serving to be consumed. So that's all three of those factors definitely elevated the conversation. What to my surprise, actually, pre and post COVID, there was a major change. Everyone told me in COVID, no one knew what was going to happen after COVID, right? But in COVID, people started telling each other, like, everything is going to be different after, on many subjects. The way we would communicate and get together in rooms and party and conference and whatever. Well, most of those things went back to normal, I would say, apart from the remote working. But food waste had become, and I didn't believe that food waste would become a bigger topic over those years, but it did. I was wrong. Yeah. I like it did come more to the agenda of those we now work with than before, to my pleasant surprise.
It's food waste is one of those things where it's not really political. It's one of those things that people from all ideologies realize it's just a bad thing. Like, there's nothing good about food waste. It's just basically burning money. Yeah. No one wants to see, like, meat that a cow was raised and then, like, or pig was raised and then, like, that's never eaten. Such a waste of resources. So I think it's just one of those things that I think everyone can get on board with.
Yeah, I think I've never met a person that likes to waste food. If anything, the people on the furthest end of the spectrum don't care, maybe, but that's the highest you can get. No one likes wasting food. And that's also with the current administration in place. Many of the sustainability topics that were on the agenda are deprioritized, obviously, but food waste is one of the few ones that is actually still very strongly on that agenda. Because no one loves to waste food. So
no one likes to waste food.
Yeah.
Can you put your futurist hat on as you think about AI and how it's changing it? I mean, I just watch aghast at, or kind of mouth open at how fast AI is changing, the new models coming out. And I'm not like Pollyannish about AI. I think there's a lot of potential downsides to it, but I do think that the power of it is just going up really quickly. So as you apply that to food waste, what are some of your thoughts of, like, how maybe AI and its kind of increasing power could impact food waste in the next 5 to 10 years?
Yeah, so that comes back to what I said before, forecasting. That's going to be all of it. So the problem about I believe forecasting could be here today because it's not a technological challenge per se. It's just that the data landscape, and I'm talking about forecasting systems, POS systems, your guest numbers or circumstantial data that might influence the way your guests eat on a particular day. That sort of data landscape is so hyper fragmented that it's near impossible to pull it together and actually do any meaningful forecasting on top of that. It's not a technological challenge on the AI end. It's more like a data harmonization challenge that we have. Yet that is also where AI can play a role, because these sort of near unusable data sets that are very poorly structured, let's say, they are all of a sudden can be disclosed by having smart AI models organize them better and making them usable in the scope of potentially forecasting. So 5 to 10 years from now, what sort of, to your question, I believe we will be able to have a glass bowl. Your AI will be a glass bowl, such as, just like it's already true for many other industries, and the food services one and the food one is the one that's the least disrupted right now. We will just know what food will be eaten where by closing the loop on food waste using technologies like ours. We will be able to see what will be eaten where, what under what circumstances, what your guests will expect of you, and actually tailor your offer to that much better, and tailor your offering, but also your volumes to that, really nipping food waste in the bud, whilst increasing the experience that your guests will have. I think that is the biggest unlock in the food waste space. And then there's a whole number of other examples, but that will be the biggest thing. The first one, and we're working on this, the first ones to really crack that nut. I mean, this is what all my clients are waiting for, really.
It's interesting that, I've been doing a report on AI and how it impacts food waste, and talking to people across the food value chain, and just generally my conversations with people just in food tech. There's just so many different kind of factors and data sets that are coming into play. Like, if you think about like increasing food transparency and how we're being able to almost real time track food as it moves through the food value chain using sensing technology and IoT, and then you start to take that data and merge it with yours. It just seems like there's going to be a lot more data to kind of track. Are you looking beyond what you are doing and maybe integrating with other data sets and other solution providers like Strela, for example, which they're one of those ones where they're kind of detecting gas from food food and produce as it expires, and they can give a prediction path on like when you need to get your food onto the store shelves, because they know when it's going to ripen and when it's going to go bad. So there's all sorts of interesting data. Are you working with some of these other solution providers, or looking to in the future?
Yeah, so ones like the one that you just mentioned, we're friends with them, but that's still pretty far removed from where we are at the absolute end of chain. We're literally at the bin where everything ends up. But the first steps, indeed, within the venue that we operate in, is connecting it to their procurement and their sales and their guest numbers, so their POS and their inventory management system. And from that point on, we can work further down, like upstream or downstream. I'm always confused, but further towards the farm, step by step, let's say. So yes, we are. That's the type of integrations that we're now working on to close the loop on this local operations. And once we've got that loop closed, then the wholesaler is going to be are going to be super stoked to also get their hands on that data, such that they also know how they can procure the best way possible and be of service to run their clients' optimized restaurants. I mean, you could argue that currently food waste is within the business model of these wholesalers, because they already sold it. But looking at all of the talks I had with them, they're also not looking to sell food that will be wasted. If they could be your trusted partner in this procurement question that they then have.
there's another question, and this isn't your specific area, but I was just at IFA and in Germany, and there was some interesting moves by some of the big home appliance makers, basically creating technology that will help consumers better track food waste. And so there's a question from the audience asking about: is there any work being done to help make food waste tech devices that will become fully integrated in apartment or housing planning processes like microwaves and other processes? Do you think about the end consumer? Are you aware of kind of what's any developments that are happening in that space, or if not, what do you think could be potential ways in which technology like AI could help consumers reduce food waste in the home?
Oh man, I love that question because that's my dream basically. The consumer is us as consumers are in the end the biggest food wasters. I talked about retail, talked about food service, but the biggest wasters all across the Western world at least are people in their own homes. So I'd love that. I dream of that in a way. The problem or the solution for a consumer is just different from what we do right now, because the reason why what we do here works is because a food service venue, they run a repetitive operations. What they cook today, they will be cooking again tomorrow or next week on a Thursday, which means that they can learn from what they did today. That doesn't work that way in your kitchen, right? You don't run an operations. You cook what you like in the moment, or at least within a week. What I would help you with is identify what you still have in your fridge, for instance.
Yep.
So and then maybe figuring out what sort of stuff you could still make when it expires, and making sure that you don't have to waste it. That helps you run a better kitchen that is more sustainable, but also easier. I think within the consumer space, everything is going to be about easier, because consumers are relentless. You can't ask anything of them really. A B2B client, you can sort of ask to alter their procedures. A B2C client, a consumer like yourself, if it doesn't work, if it doesn't make your life easier, you're just not going to do it, period. So we need to figure out
how. Very hard to get consumers to change their behavior. There's a question from Eric. We have time for one or two questions. A question from Eric Carey. Yes, he says, I imagine the challenges in gathering data from restaurants is challenging. How far are restaurants willing to share their data? Have you found that they are willing to share their data?
Yeah, no, the restaurants, they're very willing to share their data. The systems that hold that data are generally the hard ones, because they might not have their APIs ready and stuff needs to be built, or they're just sitting on their data because everyone is hoping to be that integrator of data. Our customers are generally really asking, can you combine the data that you're already producing with what we have? And generally the answer is by all means. We've built our data infrastructure such that we can receive it, but it's not always that straightforward. The only things that our customers might be reluctant to share with us is like the absolute commercial data. Then of course they've got commercial sort of contracts with their wholesalers, and they might not be eager to share that with us. But the initial sort of data that we need is not so much about the dollars. It's about the kilos, the volumes, because that's, the food waste game. Of course, it's got a bottom line profit increase, but it's about reducing volumes. It's about you bought X amount of beef, you wasted 15% of that. So now balance that better, and that will have an economic result. So the data that sort of data, they're super willing to share with us if they could. But that the bottleneck is getting that data from where it is now.
You recently, we're wrapping up on time here. But you recently changed. You've been the CEO of Orbisk for going on 6 or 7 years. You recently changed your role to Chief Innovation Officer because you really did want to get back to kind of focusing on this mission of food waste. CEOs, like you're doing like operations, you're kind of figuring out funding situations, you're trying to do payroll, but you really wanted to get back to kind of focusing on building solutions and kind of the bleeding edge technology. What are you excited about as you look forward? And what are you excited about in your new role as you think about how you can maybe use AI to reduce food waste?
Yeah, thanks for asking that. I couldn't be more delighted. I mean, our new CEO, she just started a month ago, and it's I'm not done onboarding her, but soon I will be, and it's a dream. I get to play with the Legos again in my own built company now, and I love it. And indeed, to your point, I was running the business, and I was actually envious of the people that get to actually be involved with solving the problem again. And that's where the opportunities lie. Within the space, we have further use indeed other types of AI, such as the LLMs, to generate deeper food waste advice, to build integrations to sort of enrich our data and really move our way into that forecasting angle. But more than anything, I've now set myself up in my own company to be the entrepreneur again. I get to explore like proper new frontiers. In this case, being, you already referred to it, like aviation. There's also heaps of food being wasted in that industry, like food waste kilos needlessly flown. So we're talking about the impact of the food itself, but also the fuel and whatever the environmental impact of the actual flying. It will require a whole new solution and way of using our identification mechanisms. But we do have what it takes, and I think if there's anything that I pride us for, is that seamless nature of our technology. We can build stuff that's not in your way. It's actually making your day better, and I think we can do that for the aviation industry as well. You mentioned cruise ships. We're doing some awesome stuff there. So it's there's just so much to play around still, and there's so much impact to be made. And I couldn't be more delighted to have the talented people running the company now in their place, such that I can be an entrepreneur once more.
Yeah, and you said, I mean, if you think about the total available market of what millions and millions of restaurants, only like 15,000 or so of these solutions. There's so much progress to still be made. So it's an exciting opportunity for you to look towards the future. Where can people find out more about Orbisk if they wanted to find out about Orbisk or yourself?
Yeah, so absolutely. Find me on LinkedIn by all means. Naturally, the website is just orbisk.com. I've got a leaflet that we can circulate if you want. But if you find us, our website is super clear, and I'm happy to talk to all of you on LinkedIn. Olaf at orbisk.com, also at your disposal. So I'm sure these people are well equipped to find me wherever they prefer.
All right. Well, Olaf, I always enjoy talking to you. This has been a lot of fun talking about like where AI is making impact today. And I think food waste is really one of those spaces where it can just make such a big change. And so I think you're doing interesting work, and I hope people connect with you. And thanks for your time today. It's been great.
Pleasure was all mine, Michael. Always. See you soon.
All right.